Persona 5 Royal is a game about reclaiming identity, autonomy, and meaning. While the narrative begins with an action-packed casino heist and the arrest of our main character Joker, the true story starts with Ren Amamiya, a seemingly ordinary high school student who becomes a victim of a corrupt system. One night in his hometown, Ren witnesses a drunk man attempting to force a woman into his car, ignoring her desperate pleas to stop. Acting on instinct, Ren steps in to protect her, but instead of being seen as a hero, he's punished for doing what's right. The man's name is Masayoshi Shido, a charismatic and powerful politician who uses his position to exert authority over others. When Ren intervenes, the intoxicated Shido flinches, loses his balance, and injures himself. Seizing the chance to maintain control, he threatens to sue Ren and falsely accuses him of assault. Initially, the woman Ren saved finds the courage to stand up, even saying she'll report Shido, her boss, for his financial crimes. But Shido quickly reasserts his power, threatening her into compliance. He warns that if she doesn't frame Ren, he'll pin all of his illegal activities solely on her.
But I just did as I was told.
Overwhelmed by fear of Shido's authority, the woman submits and gives a false statement that incriminates Ren. The arriving officers, equally intimidated by Shido's political clout, erase any evidence of his involvement, leaving Ren to bear the full weight of a crime that he never committed. Falsely convicted of assault, Ren's reputation is destroyed. He's expelled from his school and sent to Tokyo on probation, forced to attend Shujin Academy, one of the few schools willing to accept a student with a criminal record. Ren's reputation follows him everywhere. He's ostracized, branded as a dangerous individual. Without any effort to uncover the truth, his classmates spread rumors about his past, claiming that he carries a knife to school, uses drugs, and will beat up anyone who looks at him too long. Authority figures, from his new guardian to the Shujin Academy faculty, see him only through the lens of his alleged criminality, repeatedly urging him to keep his head down and avoid trouble, which only further perpetuates his unwanted reputation as a juvenile delinquent.
In my opinion, you're nothing but a liability, but we had our circumstances to consider.
Ren's parents sent him to live with Sojiro Sakura, the manager of Café Leblanc, and remain absent throughout the game. They are rarely mentioned and make no effort to contact their son. Though Ren has been given a second chance, his life is shadowed by society's quickness to judge, condemn, and ultimately abandon those it deems unworthy. This is where the story truly begins. At its heart, Persona 5's core theme is rebellion, except it isn't simply about characters defying authority, it's a nuanced psychological reaction to the loss of autonomy and identity. Through the lens of existential psychology, we explore the idea that people need to discover who they are and their purpose in an indifferent and chaotic world. Ren's false conviction represents a violation of identity. Identity in existential psychology isn't as simple as a person's role in society. It is a deeper, authentic, and ever-changing sense of self. On that same notion, it was never the conviction itself that was traumatic to Ren, rather how deeply it conflicted and misrepresented the hero that tried to save a helpless victim. Ultimately, Ren's transformation into Joker becomes a way to reclaim his authentic self. Soon after arriving at Shujin Academy, he encounters Ryuji, an outcast who also struggles with an oppressive figure named Kamoshida, the school's powerful and abusive sports coach. After spotting a mysterious app on their phone, they discover that their school has transmogrified into a twisted castle, a metaphysical reflection of Kamoshida's corrupted mind within a supernatural realm known as the metaverse. When a seemingly possessed Kamoshida captures them and threatens their life, Ren saves the day at the last moment by awakening to his persona, Arson. In Persona 5 Royal, a persona is a tangible manifestation of an individual's true thoughts, desires, and untapped potential. Often inspired by mythological, literary, or historical figures, these personas represent the hidden aspects of one's identity that resurface in moments of rebellion and self-discovery. Awakening to one's persona isn't a momentary shift, but a profound, fundamental change in one's personality. Personas act as as literal metaphors, blending physical and symbolic dimensions to explore the complexities of identity and self-expression. Within the game's metaphysical worlds, corrupt figures use their shadows, distorted manifestations of their darkest desires, to dominate and oppress others. Ren and his friends must fight back using their personas, which enables them to cast extraordinary, otherworldly powers. However, the concept of personas extends far beyond the physical battles. It delves deeper into each character's philosophy and spirituality. Ryuji also awakens to Captain Kidd, a persona that reflects his own rebellious spirit. Kidd, based on the historical pirate William Kidd, symbolizes the consequences of resisting authority, which Ryuji channels into his desire for freedom from Kamoshida's oppressive rule. Together, Ren and Ryuji's personas represent their quest for autonomy and justice. Autonomy in this case means reclaiming the power to make their own choices and live by their own values, rather than following the paths forced on them. These personal transformations mark the beginning of the Phantom Thieves, a group of like-minded individuals who, like Ren, use their personas to fight oppressive forces. Through the metaverse, they invade the cognitive palaces of corrupt figures and confront and transform their distorted desires to bring about real-world justice. That being said, the journey to becoming a Phantom Thief is filled with existential anguish. In fact, each member of the Phantom Thieves face their own existential crisis, where they reclaim their identity from the distortions imposed upon them by oppressive figures. At first glance, the aesthetic of the Phantom Thieves might make them seem like a bunch of naive high schoolers dressing up as criminals, completely oblivious to the weight that image carries. But for them, it's much more than that. Becoming a thief symbolizes their fight for autonomy in a world that has controlled them at every turn. The flashy visuals and flair are entertaining to us, but when you realize it's a way for these characters to hype up or reframe their otherwise traumatic lives, it becomes clear just how heartbreaking their situation truly is. The adults in Persona 5's world are consistently failing to protect these kids from abuse. Even the most well-intentioned adults end up contributing to the cycle, unintentionally perpetuating the very harm they hope to prevent.
Isn't it about time you grew up and acknowledged our situation? Right now, you're useless to me. All you do is eat away at my life.
The Phantom Thieves' rebellion isn't just a coping mechanism for mental discomfort and trivial conflict. Instead, it represents the character's conscious rejection of bad faith. In existential psychology, bad faith refers to the ways people deceive themselves into thinking they don't have freedom or responsibility. They often surrender to society's expectations or pressures instead of embracing their autonomy or their freedom. For example, Makoto Nijima exhibits bad faith by hiding behind the role of a model student and obediently following orders set by corrupt authority figures. As the class president of Shujin Academy, she becomes a victim of blackmail when Principal Kabayokawa manipulates her into identifying and investigating the Phantom Thieves for his own political gain, using her education's future as leverage to pressure her.
If something disappointing were to happen here, that wouldn't reflect very well on your sister. Do you understand?
So you're here to check up on us? You may be the student council president, but when it comes to what we do, you're useless.
Useless? Right now, you're useless to me. I'm not.
Even though she feels trapped and dissatisfied, and knows on some level that her methods to fulfilling the principal's wishes are unethical, she convinces herself that she has no choice but to follow orders. But the truth is, she has a choice, a moral responsibility to reject the principal and help the students being harassed under his orders. Each individual character struggles and eventually learns to reject their bad faith and embrace their power to shape their own lives.
He's my fiancé.
Never! I won't marry him! Ever!
I actually said it. I said how I really feel.
Whoa! That was, surprisingly simple.
You are totally right!
That being said, rebellion, avoidance, and withdrawal aren't the only ways individuals respond to oppression. The game also explores the darker consequences of lost hope. Some characters fall into despair, an existential state that emerges when individuals fail to confront their own freedom and responsibility. This dynamic illustrates the psychological dangers of evading responsibility for one's own freedom, an act of self-deception that traps individuals in a cycle of powerlessness. This concept reflects Camus's philosophy of absurdism. In this context, absurd is defined as the human struggle to find meaning in a cold, indifferent world. The social systems in Persona 5 are a reflection of this coldness. Just as the world is indifferent, so are the oppressive authority figures like Kamoshida and Shido, who don't just perpetuate injustice, but actively suppress freedom with a complete lack of empathy for those they dominate. The reality the Phantom Thieves live in is chaotic, unjust, and absurd, as it repeatedly denies people the opportunity to find intrinsic purpose or worth.
What did you say? You ordered me to call Suzui here. I can only imagine what you did to her.
In Persona 5, each palace in the metaverse represents the twisted perspective of a corrupt authority figure, like a volleyball coach who sees students as objects to control, or views the school as his own personal kingdom. Inside these palaces, shadows appear. They're manifestations of the ruler's subconscious mind, from lesser minions to the distorted self-image of that ruler. Each new palace also introduces a new Phantom Thief, who awakens to their power and learns to resist their oppressor. Inside the heart of each palace lies a treasure, the physical form of the ruler's most deeply held desire. When the thieves steal this treasure, it causes a change of heart in the ruler, leading them to feel genuine remorse for their actions. By targeting these rulers, the Phantom Thieves are forcing the corrupt figures of their society to face the truth and break free from the abusive cycles their distorted realities have created. But from a moral perspective, are the Phantom Thieves truly the good guys for doing this? Is altering someone's heart in this way proper justice, or is it an overreach of human rights?
When our opponent is literally changing hearts and distorting minds, why should we be bound to formalities? I'll end it. I swear I'll take them down, and damn the cost.
The Phantom Thieves' mission to change hearts of corrupt individuals begins as a way to address personal injustices. However, as they grow as people and leaders, so does their responsibility. Persona 5's narrative does not offer a clean, idealistic vision of justice. Instead, the game delves into the complexity and ambiguity of moral action. As the Phantom Thieves take justice into their own hands, they are forced to confront a crucial question. Are they truly doing the right thing, or are they just imposing their idea of justice onto others? This tension between personal freedom and the impact of their actions on society is central to the game's exploration of existential freedom and responsibility. Justice for the Phantom Thieves is a struggle. These characters constantly grapple with the blurred lines between right and wrong. For instance, when the Phantom Thieves target Okumura, a corrupt CEO who exploits his workers, their success in defeating his shadow seemingly leads to his death on live television.
This ain't our fault, right?
I'd like to think so.
This unexpected, traumatic turn of events causes an internal conflict within the group. They want to fight injustice, but now they have to confront how dangerous the metaverse really is, having potentially taken a life. Yoshizawa, the last to join the Phantom Thieves, remains hesitant about their mission throughout much of the story. Her concerns reflect an existential dilemma. When every major societal problem is solved metaphysically from an anonymous group, these events will naturally develop a system that risks fostering a new kind of dependence and submission from Japan's population, which can become an other form of oppression. Throughout their journey, the Phantom Thieves face a compelling conflict. Could they ultimately be reinforcing the same or similar power dynamics that they're seeking to dismantle? Characters like Sei Nijima, a public prosecutor, initially reject the Phantom Thieves' methods, raising critical questions about the ethics of their rebellion. Ethics, broadly speaking, is the study of moral principles that help us decide what actions are right or wrong, good or bad. It's a way of thinking that guides decisions about how people should act in complex situations. So, is altering someone's mind an overreach, even when the target is a morally corrupt individual? Say judges the Phantom Thieves solely by their actions, viewing them as reckless criminals who take justice into their own hands, and there's validity to her viewpoint, especially in these morally gray moments where the Phantom Thieves aren't exactly the villains, but aren't clearly the heroes either.
Get an ambulance! Call an ambulance! Turn off the cameras! Turn them off!
Their existential conflict between finding freedom for themselves and the ethical impact of their actions also, in a way, humanize, personifies villains. Perhaps these antagonists too were once idealistic, young, naive people who fell victim to the consequences of their own leadership styles and influence over time. In this video, we'll be taking a deep existential, psychological, and philosophical dive into each palace and its authority figure. We'll also be exploring how the Phantom Thieves develop ethically and morally as a collective, focusing on how their actions lead to complex societal consequences, raising very important questions about justice and responsibility.
Lies. Do those two know each other? Ew, does that mean he hit on her before transferring here?
That means she's cheating on him with Mr. Kamoshida. Then again, this is Takamaki-san we're talking about.
An Takamaki is a very kind and compassionate girl and an excellent judge of character. In fact, she's one of the only characters to be immediately skeptical of the rumors about Ren, and see him for who he truly is. However, it's difficult to witness this supportive side of An. Takamaki struggles with the tension between outward appearance and inner identity. Highlighting an existential theme from Seder's idea of the gaze describes the mental pressure one feels when aware of how others perceive them. While An is not overtly bullied by her peers or even Kamoshida, their judgments based solely on her appearance weigh heavily on her. As a blonde American in a predominantly Japanese school, her classmates view her through a lens of prejudice, assuming her to be naive and promiscuous, which only feeds into the growing rumor that she's dating Kamoshida despite being a student and a minor. Kamoshida himself appears nice on the surface, but has sinister intentions. He doesn't truly care about An. It's all a malicious attempt to control and eventually seduce Takamaki. Kamoshida's perception of An reduces her to an object of sexual desire. Trapped between the false identities of an oblivious foreigner and a promiscuous teacher's pet, An feels profoundly alienated and misunderstood. She not only believes but internalizes that people only see her for her appearance and the superficial gossip that surrounds her. Emotionally, over time, this relentless misperception from society forces her to erect barriers. Because of this, An suffers from a tremendous amount of loneliness, and it's a feeling that she both projects onto and shares with Ren when they hang out for the first time.
You seemed lonely. Almost like you didn't belong anywhere. You're the same in that regard.
Luckily, Takamaki does have one strong friendship in Shujin Academy. It's with a girl who views An for who she truly is, Shiho Suzui. Shiho is a supporting character in the Kamoshida arc and An's best friend. Once outgoing and sociable, known for her volleyball skills, Shiho suddenly becomes quiet and withdrawn. She loses confidence, stops talking to anyone, and rarely smiles. An is the only person who sees any spark of positivity from her. The two first bonded in art class when Shiho bluntly told An that her painting sucked, a comment An found refreshingly honest. An values brutal honesty over sympathy in her interactions, and this shared straightforwardness, along with their roles as social outcasts, help them grow closer together.
My best friend is often misunderstood too, all because of her looks. Sorry.
But that being said, even their strong friendship couldn't save Shiho. Shiho's story highlights existential isolation, the idea that inner suffering cannot be fully understood or shared, even by those closest to us. As a regular member of the volleyball team, Shiho is already naturally under a lot of pressure to perform, so with the addition of an abusive figure like Kamoshida, the amount of stress she experiences compounds. It becomes traumatic and accounts for her radical change in personality. Kamoshida began physically abusing Shiho during practice, covertly using hard spikes against her and the other students as a way to beat them under the guise of training. However, as he grew more comfortable and his abuse became normalized among the students, his methods escalated. He began inviting students to his office for what he would call private lessons, where he would beat them outright.
Don't do this!
Throughout her volleyball career, Shiho sustained multiple injuries from Kamoshida, including bruises on her body and face. Psychologically speaking, she struggles with depression, anxiety, PTSD, low self-esteem, and more. Beyond the physical abuse, Kamoshida weaponizes his authority, repeatedly threatening to kick Shiho off the team, using his power to break her down and force her into submission. Suzui decides to keep all of this a secret to avoid being expelled from the volleyball team. This behavior is almost universally shared with abuse victims, who inadvertently protect their abuser by obfuscating any links to the abuse. From an outside perspective, this behavior may seem self-destructive, selfish, and morally unjustifiable. However, a major factor behind these decisions is the shame and guilt abuse victims feel toward their abuser or the abusive situation. An tries to secure Shiho's spot on the team by agreeing to spend time with Kamoshida. In Takamiki's eyes, if she keeps Kamoshida happy by offering him her company, he'll stop abusing Shiho and keep her on the team. Unfortunately, this strategy of protecting her friend by appeasing the abuser eventually backfires, escalating the situation and causing traumatic harm.
Or maybe I'll start by cutting here.
Stop! Hold it right there, perv!
In Persona 5, the metaverse is a realm where the true desires and the inner nature of an individual's heart are manifested physically. Kamoshida's shadow and the castle-like structure of his palace act as literal metaphors for his embrace of active nihilism. Active nihilism involves rejecting and deconstructing traditional values and replacing them with one's own perverted, self-serving principles. While a good teacher might uphold values such as honesty, empathy, and patience, Kamoshida's values are starkly different. He prioritizes hedonism. His actions reflect pleasure-seeking, self-indulgence, and grabs at power, reflecting a deep corruption of what's expected of an authority figure. Kamoshida himself exhibits bad faith by both clinging to his position of power, constructing a fantasy in which he's untouchable, and by deceiving himself about the nature of his actions, denying any accountability for the harm and destruction that he causes.
You bastard! The hell did you do to that girl?
What are you talking about?
Don't! Play dumb with me!
The school got a call from the hospital a bit ago. That girl is in a coma and might never recover. And it's not like a vegetable can testify.
Bastard!
Go ahead and take a swing at me. You won't, though. 'Cause you can't.
Kamoshida attempts to escalate his relationship with An to a sexual level by inviting her to his home. While Takamaki tolerates his inappropriate advances to protect Shiho's position on the volleyball team, she firmly refuses to acquiesce his demands and ultimately rejects him outright over the phone. His manipulation of students reflects a denial of existential freedom. He views them not as individuals, but as objects for his pleasure used to sustain his fragile ego. Kamoshida does not take An's rejection lightly. He threatens to take Shiho off the volleyball team, and later, after having Yuki Mishima, another abuse victim, call Shiho into his office, it is heavily implied by the narrative that Kamoshida takes total sexual advantage of her.
Mr. Kamoshida seemed really irritated that day, so it must have been worse than usual. He didn't... That son of a bitch!
Thankfully, in Persona 5's absurd reality, there exist people who refuse to let this abuse go unnoticed, even when conflicted students suffering from abuse are unwilling to cooperate. Ryuji Sakamoto carries the reputation of a punk, especially with school faculty who view him as loud and disruptive.
Meet me on the rooftop in 5.
You see what I mean? Just stay away from him.
He can be brash, vulgar, and even one minor slight can trigger his short temper. There's more to Ryuji than his bad boy persona. His short temper might appear to dull his sense of morality, but in reality, it only makes it stronger. When Ryuji witnesses something unethical, he's the first to call it out for what it is, even though he probably doesn't really know what the word ethical means. This passionate yet often poorly communicated aspect of Ryuji's personality is often the butt end of the joke, but ironically, it's one of the most powerful of the group, and is arguably the main cause of Kamoshida's downfall. Kamoshida used his authority to bully and abuse students. In relation to Ryuji, treating the track team as his personal punching bag. When Ryuji finally confronted him, Kamoshida deliberately provoked him. In a fit of anger, Ryuji threw a punch, and Kamoshida retaliated by breaking Ryuji's leg under the guise of self-defense. This allowed Kamoshida to frame Ryuji's reaction as an unjustified assault, even though it was driven by witnessing abuse. Not only did Kamoshida's manipulation end Ryuji's track career, but it also branded him as a troublemaker in the eyes of faculty, the track team, and the rest of the student body. Behind his carefree, tough exterior, Ryuji is fighting for meaning in a world that's been cruel to him. He reveals that he joined the track team in the first place because he loves his mom and he wants to make her proud. That being said, even Ryuji is conflicted by his actions. No matter how justified he was in punching Kamoshida, he eventually feels a profound sense of existential guilt, remorse, and regret over living inauthentically. It's not because of the action itself, but because of the unforeseen consequences that resulted because of it. Ryuji comes from a home where his father was an abusive alcoholic who eventually left, abandoning him and his mom. So when Ryuji witnessed his mom having to show up to school and apologize for his violent behavior, it broke him. His mother claims that his misbehavior is her fault for raising him alone, but hearing this excuse only caused him to shoulder the blame himself. Despite the abusive context which influenced his heroic actions, he lives in a society that constantly teaches him that his side of the story doesn't matter. As a result, Ryuji internalizes that he's a failure. He calls himself a bad son and that the only thing he's accomplished is causing more pain to his poor mother. Ryuji's fall from the track team shatters his sense of identity, one's core understanding of who they are. He doesn't know who he is anymore. Beneath the anger lies something deeper than rage at Kamoshida. It's existential guilt, a feeling that he's failed to live a life true to himself and his values. Ryuji's struggle highlights the psychological abuse behind Kamoshida's actions. While Kamoshida did cripple Sakamoto, the long-lasting damage came from the ostracization and the character assassination as a result.
Get involved with him, okay? He's nothing but trouble. He wasn't like that when he was devoting his time to track and field, though.
Ryuji and the rest of Kamoshida's victims feel trapped, crushed, powerless, and silenced, scarred with a level of profound hopelessness that leaves them feeling like there's no way out.
Don't be a pain. You don't understand what I'm going through. Shouldn't you, of all people, know that nothing's going to help? Damn it.
On a chilly morning on April 15th, classes began like any other day. Conversations among students filled the streets, and students settled into the rhythm of their routines. But around midday, a student's attention drifts, eyes drawn to something outside the window. But as clarity settles, the shock follows.
Wait, she's going to jump!
Suzui?
Shiho? For real? Come on, let's go.
Hey, stay in your seats. Do not step foot outside of this room.
No way! Huh? Is she gonna commit suicide?
It's Suzui! Shia Suzui!
Huh? Suzui-san? Let's go look.
Shiho Suzui is spotted outside the roof of an adjacent school building. An and Ren rush out of their seats to take a look, but are too late to save her. Shiho's jump is a visceral reaction to the long-term mental health effects of isolation and dehumanization. The continuous torment of Kamoshida's physical and mental abuse drives her into existential powerlessness, where the ability to act and shape her own life seems impossible. The reactions of the heartless students, their shocked yet uncaring demeanor taking photos and gossiping, or the apathetic teachers who attempt to push the responsibility of this event onto the principal, it all reinforces the alienation she feels in this absurd environment. She's cut off from a school community that, rather than offering empathy, reduces her suffering to entertainment. This not only demonstrates her isolation further, but also reflects real life as well, where people's personal tragedies become points of gossip, which is dehumanizing to victims. Due to Shiho's attempt on her life, the full weight of Kamoshida's abuse falls on Mishima, who, overwhelmed by guilt, flees the scene. Ryuji chases after Mishima and promises that he won't get him in trouble if he tells him what happened. And Mishima, who initially withheld information to protect himself along with the other victims, admits to Kamoshida's cruelty, his escalating physical violence toward the students, which has recently culminated in forcing himself onto Shiho.
It wasn't just me or Suzui either. He'd nominate someone when he was in a bad mood and hit them.
Okay, let's go.
Beginning navigation.
What the heck are those two doing in there?
In an attempt to make sense of her reality, An follows Ren and Ryuji into Kamoshida's palace and winds up captured. Here, she's forced to confront the coach's distorted view of Shujin Academy. He sees the school as his castle, he views An as a trophy, the volleyball team as slaves, and he even blazed Takamaki for Shiho's attempt on her own life.
But, I forget that chick's name. But it's your fault she jumped, you know.
Huh?
You were so reluctant to throw yourself onto me that I had her take your place.
You bastard! Is this my punishment for what happened to Shiho? Shiho, I'm so sorry.
An feels a profound sense of guilt and recognizes that she failed Shiho. And while this abusive situation is undeniably unfair to both of these girls, An is correct. She did not take full responsibility for saving her friend. She subconsciously minimized the obvious signs of distress, such as Shiho's drastic personality changes and apparent physical indicators of trauma. Her paralysis and self-deception in responding to Shiho's obvious pain reflects Sator's burden of freedom, the realization that even an action carries weight. On some level, An was always supportive of Shiho, connecting with her as an outcast herself and even indulging Kamoshida with her time to secure Shiho's position on the team, but she failed to take the abuse as seriously as she could, and at times even ignored it, abandoning Shiho with her abuser.
See you, Shiho.
Radical freedom suggests that we are fully responsible for the actions we choose in situations where we can make a difference. Just as An reaches her breaking point, surrendering to Kamoshida's control, Ren urges her not to give up, and in that moment, clarity strikes her. In truth, Takamaki always had a responsibility to protect Shiho, not just in the past, but even now. She realizes that it's up to her to seek justice for Shiho, to challenge and dismantle the corrupt authority figure that has systemically inflicted pain onto others. She understands that by remaining passive, she's allowing Kamoshida's influence to harm others to continue, which is not only a betrayal of her friends and classmates, but to herself as well. At the moment of rebellion, An awakens to Carmen, her persona. Carmen is based on Carmen, an opera from 1875 based on the novella of the same name. The story mirrors An's journey by highlighting struggles against a controlling man, societal expectations, and self-perception. On the surface, An's outfit is arguably the most provocative out of the thieves, but it clearly comes from a place of accepting one's beauty and its influence for good rather than manipulation and coercion. This reflects how An's journey isn't just about defying Kamoshida, it's about using her strength to make the world better, showing that true freedom requires not just resistance, but purposeful action, with heart and justice. For Ren Amamiya and Ryuji Sakamoto, their awakening marks the moment they fight back against a system that has labeled them as delinquents. Ren, ostracized by society and misunderstood, gains Arsene from the creations of Maurice Leblanc. Arsene Lupin is known for his wit, mastery of disguise, and his ability to outsmart others, all while adhering to a strong moral code. He often targets the unjustly wealthy to balance the scales of justice, and is seen as the ideal anti-hero, operating outside the law, but within a robust ethical framework. Think of a more mischievous, less addicted Sherlock Holmes. Together, they bring out the best in each other. Their recip introduces the concept that powerful resistance is not just about breaking rules, it's about understanding why those rules are worth challenging in the first place. For Ryuji, a once promising athlete whose life was derailed by Kamoshida's abuse, Kid becomes a symbol of raw defiance and the struggle against oppressive control. Captain Kid gives Ryuji that extra push, serving not just as an outlet for his rage, but also instilling him in a bolder stance against injustice. Ryuji also has a knack for impulsivity, which time and time again yields self-destructive results. Ryuji taps into Kid's daring nature, learning to stand up without the crippling weight of self-doubt, and he also begins to think more strategically about his actions, like a respected privateer would.
Do you want to finish him off? It's your call.
No, please wait. I beg you. Just forgive me.
Suguru Kamoshida is the quintessential example of narcissistic personality disorder. Augmented with sociopathic traits and unchecked power, Kamoshida's delusions of grandeur created a profoundly dangerous environment within the very same school system he claims to have improved. His grandiosity, need for admiration, and lack of empathy further characterizes him as a tyrant, and his superficial charm, manipulation for personal gain, and dominance through physical and psychological abuse clearly reflect his corrupt and destructive leadership. Kamoshida is a textbook narcissist. You can identify a narcissist by several arrogant and entitled characteristics within their personality. These traits also don't appear in specific contexts, they are pervasive, meaning they are active in different aspects of one's life. They are stable over time and cause significant distress and impairment to others. Kamoshida's main personality trait is his grandiosity. This is reflected in his manifestations of being a king of a castle, in the place of a mere coach at a school. His shadow also admits that he sees himself as superior to students and faculty. This belief, however, isn't only subconscious because he exercises this belief in reality, under the guise of plausible deniability. His delusions of grandeur cause him to see his contributions to the school not as useful, but essential. He's so deluded that he claims the entire school's existence is dependent on him. He's not being hyperbolic either. This is a deep and profound psychological delusion, where he's unable to fathom the school operating without him. Despite all these claims of superiority, Suguru is clearly compensating for insecurity. On the surface, he wears this superficial charm, which is also common in narcissists, and he uses this to manipulate others, because deep down, Kamoshida's need for validation and admiration from the people he dominates controls him. Ultimately, his need for admiration leads to his downfall. While subtle abuse and power grabs would have been hard to prove, he becomes overly and antagonistically abusive when his needs aren't met.
It's like I'll have to crack the whip. She'll have to take responsibility for her friend's actions.
The last factor we'll discuss is his lack of empathy, and by extension, his entitlement and exploitation of students. In the boss fight, Kamoshida uses and discards Shadow, Shiho, and Mishima without a second thought. When the Phantom Thieves kill Shadow Suzui in self-defense, immediately after her death, Suguru calls her useless, because he sees everyone as nothing more than tools for his own personal gain. This is reflected in reality after using Shiho physically and mentally, and avoiding accountability for her self-inflicted demise.
Even if it is exactly as you imagine it to be, hypothetically speaking, what can you do?
When Kamoshida is defeated, we see a deeper look into his fragile self-esteem. The treasure is symbolism for his achievements and status, and he instinctively rushes to grab it, cowering in fear. He justifies his abuse, expressing that it was the high expectations that made him a victim, and that there's nothing wrong with asking for a reward. When he accepts defeat, we get one final look into his values. He places importance on competition over everything. He tells the thieves they have a right to kill him, because they won. Ultimately, Kamoshida's submission might yield mixed feelings. This is because the nature of narcissism is grounded in a dual role of perpetrator and victim. On one hand, I genuinely believe Suguru was cursed with the perception of having to always be on top, with traumatic experiences that helped shape that belief system, and that despite all these horrible acts coupled with displays of grandeur, Kamoshida is less of a stereotypical bully with no perception of consequences, and more aligned with someone who's only alleviated his deep existential pain through winning. This is the reality of dealing with narcissists. While the clinical definition satisfyingly labels them as arrogant jerks and personal interactions with them are intense, making it impossible to sympathize with them, they are emotionally isolated individuals living very painful, entirely self-sustained interior lives. That being said, there's a complex phenomenon where narcissists are genuinely victims to their mentalities, yet victimizing them also feeds into their manipulation. Kamoshida is intelligent enough to understand the social benefits of spewing this victim narrative at the last minute to save himself, even when what he's admitting is the truth. Manipulation is more about the motivation behind actions rather than the actual mechanics, such as lying and further deceptions. As a result, he's admitting his true feelings and, in the moment, genuinely feeling these intense emotions of shame and fear, but it's simultaneously a defense mechanism, a final attempt to manipulate the story to save himself. After being spared by the Phantom Thieves, Shadow Kamoshida returns to his true self, which begins the process of changing his heart, causing a profound empathetic change in his psyche and the elimination of his destructive cognitive distortions.
I am truly sorry for putting innocent youths through such horrible acts.
And while justice is brought to the abuser of Shujin High, it ultimately begs the question, was this operation entirely ethical?
His heart really did change.
Seems like it. But was this really for the best?
Madarame-san is actually here?
Over there!
I'm so glad I came on opening day.
Ichi Ryusai Madarame is a name revered in the art world. To the public, he is a polite, soft-spoken artist celebrated for his humility and dedication to nurturing young talent. He seems to live modestly, devoted to sustaining the longevity of true art rather than remaining in the business for personal gain. He presents himself as a kind-hearted mentor, often referring to himself as a cranky old artist to appear relatable. Overall, Madarame's reputation as a veteran of the arts who selflessly guides the next generation is humble, selfless, influential, and eerily too perfect. Yusuke Kitagawa, Madarame's most devoted apprentice, is a young artist with extraordinary talent. Yusuke sees his mentor as a source of wisdom and inspiration, even a surrogate father. Orphaned at a young age, Yusuke has spent his life under Madarame's guidance. What begins as a story of mentorship soon unravels into a tale of manipulation.
Well then, if you'll excuse me.
The public sees Madarame as a humble artist, but Yusuke experiences the truth, a mentor who has abandoned the spirit of art to maintain his hollow legacy.
He gave me lodging at his home, where I thought only about art. I genuinely wanted to be an artist. There was another pupil as well, a very talented man, multiple years my senior. Everything he made was claimed as a Madarame original. In response to Madarame's actions, that senior pupil committed suicide.
This mass deception of the public is Madarame's magnum opus. Behind closed doors, Madarame is a man obsessed with maintaining his fame no matter the cost. His students are drawn to him by his reputation and surface-level kindness, and while it seems that he offers support to these young, upcoming artists, providing them with food and shelter, they soon discover his assistance to be a manipulation tactic, designed to trap his victims in a system that steals their art and claims their work as his own. Madarame feels no guilt for his plagiarism. In fact, he plays the role of an authentic artist with unnerving ease, disarming suspicion with his soft-spoken charm and frail demeanor.
Even I doubt that a cranky old man like myself could be liked by everyone, but Yusuke has done nothing wrong, so don't associate him with these rumors. Please, I beg you.
Yusuke Kitagawa is an artist devoted to his craft. His life revolves around a constant pursuit of beauty. This devotion, while admirable, is accompanied by a level of intensity that often perplexes those around him. For instance, upon encountering An in public, Yusuke follows her and earnestly requests that she pose nude for his artwork. The motivation behind this request does not stem from ill intent, but from his unfiltered dedication to artistic expression. Yusuke's focus on his vision often blinds him to social conventions, leaving him unaware of how his actions may be perceived by others.
We're here to keep an eye on you, so don't try anything perverted, okay?
In this case, he views the idea of An modeling in the nude as purely artistic, entirely overlooking the sexual implications of such a request. His naive sincerity, however, highlights a young artist misunderstood and inexperienced, rather than intentionally inappropriate.
If you are willing to bear everything to me, I will put my heart and soul into creating the best nude painting ever.
What?
Despite his intentions, his introduction to the Phantom Thieves was perceived as awkward. The group's skepticism only deepens when Yusuke invites them to Madarame's art exhibit, unaffected by the whispers surrounding his mentor's alleged exploitation of his students. These rumors gain traction through the testimony of former pupils. For example, Natsuhiku Nakanohara recounts to the Phantom Thieves how Madarame exploited him for labor, bringing him into his home and delivering meticulously crafted scraps of praise as a way to maintain gain control over him.
I'd like to ask again. Please, make Madarame have a change of heart. Not only for me. It's to save the life of another man as well.
This testimony and others collectively paint a picture of the scam artist whose apparent greatness is, truthfully, built on the backs of others, a reality Yusuke struggles to accept. On and the rest of the Phantom Thieves orchestrate a dual investigation. On, under the guise of modeling nude for Yusuke, seeks to gather intel of Madarame from the physical world, while the others delve into his palace in the metaverse. During her investigation, On discovers an ominous back room within Madarame's home. She cleverly tricks Yusuke into entering through the door and exposing its secrets, uncovering the painting Sayori. It bears clear signs of being duplicated, defaced, and fraudulently passed off as Madarame's own work. Confronted with the truth, Yusuke's denial begins to waver as he begs his mentor for answers.
What is the meaning of this?
I suppose I can't keep quiet now that you've seen this. Truth be told, I'm in severe debt.
Madarame attempts to manipulate Yusuke further by fabricating a story about being in debt, sprinkling bits of truth into his lies to create an illusion of vulnerability. This action, referred to as fake vulnerability, is a deceptive communication tactic designed to appear sincere, but in reality only serves as a tool to manipulate others and gain sympathy. Although this has an effect on Yusuke, who is already emotionally invested in his sensei, On remains skeptical. As she continues to press Madarame for the truth, exposing inconsistencies in his story, Madarame's facade begins to crack. Rather than admitting fault, he overcompensates by escalating the situation, reporting them to his private security company and threatening legal action. Before the situation spirals further, Yusuke and On manage to escape by entering the metaverse and Madarame's palace. While Yusuke challenges Madarame initially, the weight of the evidence clashes with his long-held perception of a benevolent mentor. This confrontation triggers a profound cognitive dissonance, the psychological tension that arises when conflicting beliefs, values, or attitudes collide.
You may not want to believe it, but this is another reality as viewed through Madarame's eyes. This is his true nature.
For Yusuke, reconciling his admiration for Madarame with the reality of his exploitation proves to be a deeply painful and transformative experience. Orphaned as a child, Yusuke was taken in by Madarame, who provided him with shelter and the illusion of guidance. In truth, Madarame manipulated Yusuke's gratitude and fear of abandonment, creating a power imbalance that left Yusuke feeling powerless to escape. Learned helplessness occurs when repeated stressful experiences drive people to believe they are unable to control or change them. Yusuke demonstrates this psychological state by rationalizing Madarame's repeated emotionally manipulative behavior. Even as doubts about Madarame's credibility grew, Yusuke remained willingly oblivious to his mentor's flaws because the image of a benevolent mentor was more vital to him than confronting the harsh reality that he's actually a fraud.
This is all one big lie, isn't it?
Madarame's palace, a lavish museum filled with counterfeit art, perfectly encapsulates his twisted philosophy and exploitation of young artists. The expansive galleries, adorned with paintings and sculptures, appear grand at first glance, but are ultimately hollow, reflecting Madarame's fraudulent legacy. The paintings of his former students, including Yusuke, hang prominently throughout the palace, distorting their likeness to symbolize how he strips them of their autonomy. These depictions reveal his dehumanization of his students, displaying them as trophies of his control used to sustain a system that exploits, confines, and discards young artists once they've been drained of their value. Madarame's shadow is depicted as a shogun, a tyrant seated atop stolen wealth and glory. This self-image reflects his delusions of grandeur, where he views himself as a ruler of the art world, entitled to exploit and destroy others for his selfish gain. For Kitagawa, the ultimate betrayal comes when Shadow Madarame reveals the true origin of the Sayori, the very same painting that inspired Yusuke's passion for art. It was not created by Madarame, as Yusuke had always believed, but by his late mother. The Sayori had become a celebrated work in Japan for its supposed ambiguity, depicted a woman with an enigmatic expression and a cloud obscuring what lay beneath her gaze. However, the version displayed publicly was a fraud. Madarame had altered the original, painting over its true contents to fabricate a sense of mystery, increasing its appeal to an audience of art enthusiasts. enthusiasts. In the metaverse, Madarame's treasure manifests into the real Sayori, making it the only legitimate copy left. This unaltered version reveals not a mysterious woman staring off into a cloud, but a mother tenderly holding her child, a simple, heartfelt depiction of a dying woman's love for the son she would leave behind. Yusuke's mother had been terminally ill, prone to seizures and other medical complications. On the day she collapsed in Madarame's home, he purposely chose not to call for an ambulance, allowing her to die so that he could steal her work and pass it off as his own. Yusuke's image of Madarame as a benevolent father figure already began to crack, but this revelation of Madarame's depravity made his actions unforgivable.
You killed her.
To Yusuke, the Sayori was not only the source of his inspiration and love for artistry, but a subconscious link to his mother's memory. Finally confronted with the truth of Madarame's exploitation, Yusuke reaches his breaking point. The overwhelming weight of betrayal and the desecration of his late mother's legacy ignites a fierce determination within him to break free from his mentor's influence. This moment of clarity leads to his awakening. Yusuke's persona, Gomen, symbolizes rebellion and artistry. Inspired by the historical outlaw Ishikawa Gomen, who defied authority and sought justice for the oppressed, his persona represents the independence and fearlessness he needs to liberate himself from Madarame's control. His flamboyant and theatrical design mirrors Yusuke's unique artistic perspective, harmonizing his creative vision and personal identity. By accepting his persona, Yusuke takes his first step toward becoming an independent artist, free from the shadow of his exploitive mentor. After Madarame is defeated, he attempts to justify his actions. To Ichi-Ryusai, the soul behind art has lost all meaning. He views it as only a commodity. This distorted belief is used to justify securing wealth and public admiration over passion by systematically exploiting young artists who choose to dedicate their lives to creation. He calls his students his art, a justification as twisted as it is self-serving, and he critiques the art world, calling it superficial, yet his mass theft is hypocritical. In the aftermath, Madarame publicly confesses to his crimes during a live broadcast, admitting to plagiarism, exploitation, and fraud. The world that once celebrated him as a master artist now sees him for what he truly is, a manipulative opportunist who built his legacy on the systemic oppression of his victims. Yusuke recognizes the irony of his mother's final piece. Originally a heartfelt depiction of maternal love, was twisted into a commodity for Madarame's selfish gain. Yet Yusuke finds solace in knowing that his mother was spared the pain of witnessing her work's desecration. He resolves to honor her memory by ensuring that the painting is returned to its true purpose. In a conversation with Sojiro, Yusuke reveals his plans to leave Madarame's home and embrace a more independent life in his school dormitory. He aims to connect with others and find inspiration through new relationships and experiences. However, keeping the Sayori presents a dilemma due to its recent televised controversy. Ultimately, Yusuke chooses to hang the Sayori in Leblon, a modest coffee shop far removed from the grandeur of art galleries and the corruption of Madarame's influence. By placing it in such an unassuming setting, Yusuke returns the painting to its humble beginnings, just as his mother would have wanted.
Now your next target was this man, Junya Kaneshiro. He doesn't compare to the previous two. Even the police had been struggling to apprehend him. So, exactly how did you take down such a well-guarded criminal? Tell me.
Junya Kaneshiro is a name whispered in the back alleys of Tokyo, a shadowy figure who operates beyond the reach of the law. To the unsuspecting public, he is invisible, but within the criminal underground world, he is known as a shrewd and formidable mafia boss. Kaneshiro's true power lies not in the overt displays, but in the subtle, pervasive influence of money. Operating from the shadows, he manipulates the lives of students and adults alike by extending loans that quickly spiral into insurmountable debt. His methods are insidious. Utilizing blackmail and surveillance, Kaneshiro gathers incriminating information to ensure compliance. Victims are coerced into into illegal activities to repay their debt, leaving them drained and defenseless. Kanoshiro views people merely as a means to an end, their worth measured by the profit they generate. Kanoshiro's empire thrives on secrecy and fear. His wealth is ostentatious to his circles, yet concealed from the general public. Unlike the grandiosity of the now infamous Madarame, Kanoshiro maintains a low profile. He understands that his operations depend on remaining unseen. This anonymity allows him to exploit the system unchecked, reinforcing his belief that money is the ultimate power, capable of bending anyone to his will.
Don't touch me! Get off!
Makoto Nijima is burdened by the roles imposed upon her by society. As the student council president of Shujin Academy, she is expected to maintain order and discipline, a responsibility that becomes increasingly difficult amid the growing influence of the Phantom Thieves. Having lost her mother at an early age and her father, a high-ranking police officer 3 years prior, Makoto carries the profound weight of her family's tragedies. Her father's murder in the line of duty while investigating a local gang left lasting scars on both sisters. Sai Nijima, forced to take on the role of a caretaker, developed a perfectionist mindset that propelled her to become a public prosecutor at a young age. However, Sai's relentless drive and success cultivated identical expectations that society projects onto Makoto. This family dynamic leaves Makoto vulnerable to manipulation by authority figures who exploit her sense of duty and fear of failure.
Your sister would have solved this easily if she were in your position. My expectations of you are very high. I hope you don't disappoint.
Makoto experiences cognitive dissonance as she feels torn between complying with a system that rewards her submission but stifles her autonomy, creating an inner conflict between individuality and conformity. While she is unquestionably intelligent, analytical, responsible, and moral, Makoto's flaws often go unnoticed by others. Beneath her composed exterior lies a deep-seated insecurity and naivete that manifests in moments of impractical decision-making. Outside of school, she is inexperienced and reckless in navigating social situations, leading to actions driven by determination but lacking foresight.
So foolish. What am I doing?
For instance, when she suspects several students to be the Phantom Thieves, a rumored group suspected to be mind-controlling their targets into submission, Makoto recklessly confronts these potentially dangerous criminals alone on a secluded rooftop. Instead of reporting solid evidence of their identities to the school administration or the authorities, she strikes a deal with them. She will withhold their secret if they help her change the heart of Kanashiro, a notorious mafia boss. And in her desperation to prove her usefulness, Makoto escalates her involvement in the operation by directly confronting and threatening local drug dealers, which is an impulsive act that ultimately leads to her capture by Kanashiro's gang. Kanashiro sees this as opportunity to exploit the group's vulnerability. Recognizing Makoto as Shujin High's student council president, he leverages this information to blackmail her and the Phantom Thieves. He presents them with a photograph implicating them in illicit activities, demanding 3 million yen in 3 weeks to prevent its release. The threat of distributing such an incriminating photo endangers the reputation of Makoto, and by extension, the entire school, the public prosecutor herself, and the future of the Phantom Thieves. This encounter shatters Makoto's perception of control. She realizes that her adherence to authority has not equipped her to handle the moral complexities and dangers of the real world. This weight of expectation transforms into a crushing sense of powerlessness. Upon their release, Makoto apologizes to the Phantom Thieves about her reckless behavior that involved and complicated everyone. She also directly apologizes to An about her passivity in Kamoshido's predatory behavior. In this conversation, it is subtextually revealed that Makoto is suffering from moral injury, where deeply held moral beliefs are betrayed by institutions or authority figures expected to uphold them.
You knew, didn't you? About Mr. Kamoshida sexually harassing students. Sir!
Principal Kabayokawa was aware of Kamoshido's gross sexual misconduct, and his inaction made him complacent in the abuse, and by extension, so was Makoto, a sentiment which An shares with her. Makoto continues to experience imposter syndrome, the internalized belief where one's doubts about their abilities and fears of being exposed as inadequate manifest into insecurity. She admits that she is truly a useless girl with no place to belong.
You didn't have a place to belong either. Isn't that right?
Me either? We won't let anyone fall victim again.
It is at this moment that the Phantom Thieves begin to accept her as one of their own and introduce her to the metaverse.
It's another reality in which Kanashiro's distorted desires have materialized.
Another reality?
Kanashiro's palace is a colossal bank floating above the city, symbolizing his dominion over those ensnared by his debt. Within this distorted world, Kanashiro's victims are reduced to ATM machines, whose function is to only be drained of value. Because to Kanashiro, everyone has a price and everyone can be owned. The grandeur of the bank is a facade, masking the emptiness of a world driven solely by nihilism and greed. Kanashiro himself is depicted as a grotesque, bloated figure hovering over a mountain of money. This exaggerated form highlights his insatiable appetite for wealth and the moral decay that accompanies it. He perceives himself as untouchable.
It's time you disappear.
In their confrontation, Kanashiro taunts Makoto. He calls the men of the group Dead Man Walking, but refers to Makoto and her sister as beautiful assets, claiming he'll use his coercion to enslave Sai and sell her off once he's bored of her. He tries to scare Makoto by reminding her how successful her sister could have been had she not been so reckless, further commanding her to endure and conform to his abuse.
I've been listening to you go on and on. Shut your damn mouth, you money-grubbing asshole!
The realization that the structures she trusted cannot protect her or those she cares about sparks a transformation in Makoto. Surrounded by danger and with no authority to rely on, she heroically decides to take control of her fate. Makoto awakens to her persona, Johanna. Inspired by the legend of Pope Joan, a woman who, according to myth, disguised herself as a man to ascend to papacy, Joanna symbolizes hidden strength and the breaking of societal constraints. This persona manifests as a robotic woman capable of transforming into a motorcycle, a triple-layered reference. Just as Transformers disguise themselves as vehicles to navigate the world, Pope Joan disguises herself as a man to achieve the impossible, and Makoto must disguise herself as a diligent student rather than a phantom thief fighting for justice, shielding herself not only from the law, but also from the sexist systems that she navigates, whether it's Principal Kobayakawa, Kanashiro, or even her sister, Sai Nijima. Sai Nijima teaches Makoto that climbing the social ladder is difficult as a woman. The process isn't as streamlined as it is for men, and she emphasizes the necessity for women to seize authority as soon as possible in order to advance in society. Sai's perspective is both biased and valid. The game shows moments where even the public prosecutor's efforts are minimized, and societal expectations are forced onto her due to her sex.
If I recall correctly, you still aren't married, are you? Why not look for a husband while you're at it?
However, Sai's experience in sexist workplaces also distort her own view of women, as she imposes her own perfectionist ideals, such as academic excellence and impeccable composure, onto women like Makoto. While this mindset may theoretically prepare Makoto for figures like Principal Kobayakawa, who weaponizes her impossible standards against her, or Kanashiro, who blatantly details his objectification of her, Sai's mentality, while designed to combat male sexism in society, ends up creating an other system where women are forced to conform to rigid expectations.
You don't need to think about such unnecessary things. You understand what I'm trying to say, right?
Study hard and go to a prestigious college.
Sai's approach is neither inherently evil nor good, but multifaceted, and when it is used negligently, it is ironically just as oppressive as the male-dominated system it critiques. For instance, Sai's mindset does benefit women seeking powerful positions, changing the status quo, or learning practical female advice for navigating socio-political complexities. But when these ideals are projected onto women like Makoto, who are then verbally abused and condescended to for questioning or opposing them, this so-called progressive system reveals itself as a selfish vehicle Sai and other powerful women use to reinforce and impose their own worldview onto others, ironically stripping the autonomy of the very same women they claim to protect.
Isn't it about time you grew up and acknowledged our situation? Right now, you're useless to me. All you do is eat away at my life.
Kanashiro's palace filled with ATMs and faceless guards dehumanizes his victims, but his transformation into a mosquito-human hybrid symbolizes his own cognition's admittance to his parasitic role in society, draining the desperate of their resources to sustain his wealth. His self-depiction of a mosquito's fragility and insignificance portray his hidden nihilism. Kanashiro subconsciously recognizes that his existence, like a mosquito's, is dependent on others, and without his victims, his power crumbles. This description is supported by interactions where Kanashiro admittedly gets easily stressed, and his coping mechanism is spending money. A coping mechanism is a strategy or behavior a person uses to manage stress, regulate emotions, or challenge situations. His fixation on money is a shield against the powerlessness he likely felt when he became aware of his flaws as a person. His lack of conventional attractiveness, his limited intellect, and his dependence on money to compensate for these shortcomings. Kanashiro believes that the world rewards exploitation, and that thriving in society requires draining others before they drain you. There is some truth to this perception. Society does sometimes devalue human life in favor of its superficial aspects, and those that society deem as weaker, especially financially, may struggle immensely. But Kanashiro's nihilism tunnels in on these truths. By hyper-focusing on society's worst inclinations, he constructs a corrupt coping mechanism where he justifies financial abuse and enslavement by viewing the world as inherently broken and stripping it of all its meaning. When defeated, Kanashiro's shadow initially repents, calling off the debt and labeling himself as poor, ugly, and an idiot. However, he never truly takes responsibility for his actions and even calls himself a victim. He also continues to taunt the Phantom Thieves, gleefully notifying them of a shadowy figure who is using their same method of invading palaces, murdering people's shadows, and causing mental shutdowns in Japan. Kanashiro's shadow physically departs, retreating into his true self, and while the real Kanashiro does admit to his crimes, there's no catharsis or resolutions as opposed to other palace rulers. This experience questions the validity of a change of heart. When a criminal's heart is changed, do aspects of their personality truly change for good? And does it even matter what the shadow says as long as it returns to his owner and it results in repentance? After his confession, Makoto relays the news report to her sister, who reveals her disappointment in Kanashiro's confession. To the public prosecutor, the importance of the case's resolution didn't lie in the prevention and mitigation of further societal damage, but whether or not she could claim the credit for the mafia boss's arrest. Makoto challenges Sai Nijima's perception of justice one last time, asking if what truly matters here is justice and not the material gain. And her sister ends the conversation by condescending to her for not matching her worldview.
Why does it matter? The police still caught him in the end, right?
I had plans set for a promotion, but no one can take credit for his arrest now with that confession. Not that a child would understand.
Promotion. You've changed, sis. But I'll be okay. I finally found a place where I belong.
So then by tampering with hearts, the Phantom Thieves are fabricating crimes that may not exist?
There's no doubt that the Phantom Thieves are exposing hidden injustices in society. However, if this is done by sidestepping the law, their way of thinking is very dangerous.
So in a way, they're outlaws.
Yes. They're no different than the criminals they target. This cannot be overlooked.
I see.
Oh, I see. My ass.
As the Phantom Thieves defeat Kanashiro, their mission escalates from targeting corrupt school teachers to confronting underground mafia bosses, broadening the scale of their operations. This growth draws public attention, including criticism from Goro Akechi, famously known as the Prince Detective and second to Sai Nijima. On live television, Akechi challenges the ethics of the Phantom Thieves' vigilantism, pointing out that their methods bypass legal systems and undermine societal order. From an ethical standpoint, Akechi's perspective is valid. However, rising reports of a black mask criminal using the metaverse to cause fatal neurological breakdowns complicates the debate. Unlike the Phantom Thieves who reform their targets, this individual uses the metaverse as a method for murder. Japan's legal system also has no laws protecting its citizens from the metaverse. Government officials are both unaware of its existence and reluctant to acknowledge any supernatural concepts without direct evidence. This governmental blind eye directly stunts the system's system's development, manifesting a Wild West dynamic within the metaverse. While ethical scrutiny of the Phantom Thieves' actions remains an important discussion, institutional changes for this metaphysical world are not only time-consuming, but have yet to even begin. Meanwhile, the dangers posed by the metaverse today demand immediate action. In this context, the Phantom Thieves' vigilantism, while justifiably controversial, actually becomes a necessary response to an unprepared legal system.
These are the details of the message that are posted on Medjed's website. To the Phantom Thieves causing an uproar in Japan. Do not speak of your false justice. We do not need the spread of such falsehood. We are the true executors of justice.
A new phenomenon captures public attention, a hacktivist group named Medjed. Operating as another opposing voice to the Phantom Thieves ideology, these cyber terrorists threaten the thieves, coercing them to cease their activities and reveal their identities to the public. The looming threat of Medjed's cyber attacks sparks widespread discussion. Akechi comments on the situation further, critiquing the legality of both groups' methods.
Both Medjed and the Phantom Thieves are nothing more than groups that uphold an egoistic justice.
While the Phantom Thieves receive scrutiny and threats from broader society, they also receive a cryptic threat from an individual hacker calling themselves Alibaba. This indecipherable figure offers a deal. If the thieves agree to steal a specific person's heart, Alibaba will aid them in neutralizing Medjed. Any attempts to reply to the hacker are usually met with an error message. Caught between the demands of two mysterious hacker groups, uncertain of the true intentions behind each party, the Phantom Thieves move over to LeBlanc to discuss their move before they receive a letter from Alibaba himself. It isn't addressed to anyone, so not only does Alibaba have access to their identities and phones, but he's even physically located and visited their base of operations. Alibaba continues to text Ren his demands, offering the name of the target for the change of heart, Futaba Sakura, before, once more, threatening to report the group to the authorities if they don't comply. On notices the link between the names Futaba Sakura and Sojiro Sakura, suspecting that the target is the cafe owner's daughter. The Phantom Thieves investigate Sojiro, noting his secretive behavior, such as purchasing more food than required for a single man, and his reluctance to discuss his connection to the mysterious girl.
Why did you know about that?
Considering these factors, along with the fact that Alibaba remains elusive, yet close enough to confirm Futaba's condition and deliver mail to LeBlanc, Makoto concludes that Alibaba and Futaba Sakura are one and the same. Deciding to confront the issue directly, the thieves visit Sojiro's residence at night and find Futaba, who quickly runs back into her room once she's been discovered. Sojiro, initially upset at their break-in, relocates everyone back to LeBlanc and recounts Futaba's tragic past. Wakaba, described as sharp-witted, stern, socially awkward yet carefree, was a brilliant researcher and a single mother who balanced her career with raising Futaba. Although Wakaba never spoke about Futaba's father, she appeared to lead a fulfilling life until the day she passed away. For reasons unknown, Wakaba seemingly threw herself onto an oncoming vehicle. Her sudden death traumatized her daughter, who witnessed this perceived suicide firsthand. Despite sharing last names, Sojiro is not Futaba's biological father. Instead, he is a lifelong friend of Wakaba who adopted Futaba after her mother's passing. In Futaba's case, she hid herself away from even her own guardian and buried herself in her room with her digital interests. After many attempts to break through to her, Futaba finally revealed to Sojiro her reason for her depression. She blames herself for her mother's death. This distorted view of Wakaba's death developed into visual and auditory hallucinations, with Futaba claiming she began to hear voices and see her mother's face. Despite her struggles, Futaba rejects medical evaluations and has deteriorated psychologically, developing several anxiety disorders. The most prominent is agoraphobia, an anxiety disorder characterized by an intense fear of situations where escape might be difficult or help unavailable. Individuals with agoraphobia often avoid unfamiliar or crowded places, frequently confining themselves to their homes to minimize anxiety triggers. Now having gained a deeper understanding of her pain, the thieves revisit Futaba in a sympathetic light, offering her genuine help to enter her palace and change her heart. Ultimately, Futaba agrees, albeit distantly through IM messages, and provides the thieves with the necessary information to enter her palace. Futaba's palace stretches across a vast arid desert, with an imposing pyramid towering at its center, a mental construct of the tomb where she has buried her true self. Its Egyptian aesthetic also contains technological characteristics. Characters, symbols, and coding symbolizes her overall affinity for technology, and more specifically coding. Filled with traps, puzzles, temples and Egyptian paintings, every element of the palace represents the complexities and distortions of Futaba's mind. For instance, as they explore further, the thieves come across paintings depicting a relationship between Futaba and her mother, covering traumatic moments like when Futaba witnessed her mother's death, or the secretive men in suits reading Futaba a suicide note. Her palace is a hostile, unyielding maze that perfectly reflects her internal life. While Futaba's love for technology and pop culture demonstrates a sense of adolescent normalcy, these innocent interests deeply contrast with her frequent mental afflictions, like overwhelming ruminations that spiral into anxiety attacks, profoundly impacting her quality of life.
That's right. I killed Mom. I don't deserve to be alive.
Every detail of the palace mirrors how Futaba's pain and guilt have twisted her perception of the world, herself, and her past. At the heart of the pyramid resides Futaba's shadow, a spectral figure cloaked in Egyptian garb, representing her inner turmoil and self-loathing. Unlike the antagonistic shadows the thieves have faced before, Futaba's shadow does not seek to harm them initially. Instead, expresses a duality of yearning for release and the cynical acceptance of labeling herself as her mother's killer.
That's right. I did it.
What?
I am the one who killed my mother.
This cognitive dissonance signifies that the real battle does not lie with the defeat of Futaba's shadow, but when Futaba is finally able to face herself. In an unprecedented turn of events, Futaba deduces the Phantom Thief's methods of entering a palace and enters her own palace. The final obstacle within the palace is the manifestation of Futaba's distorted perception of Wakaba, a colossal sphinx that represents the false accusations and resentment that she believes caused her mother to take her own life. As Futaba enters the heart of the palace, she faces herself. Her shadow challenges Futaba's perception of her past, throwing down paintings that represent the core experiences of her trauma. At first, Futaba reflexively blames herself for her mother's death, but her shadow is patient with her, asking her to dig deeper into her recollections and remember every detail about her mother. Futaba remembers tough moments where her hardworking mother would scold her for throwing a tantrum. Young Futaba was frustrated, believing her mother loved her work more than she loved her daughter. And while it is valid for her to feel this way, it was far from the truth. Futaba's shadow finally breaks through to her, and she finally recalls her mother scolding her, but also promising her shortly after that when she completed her research, she would take Futaba on vacation wherever she wanted. She remembers her mother smiling at her, proof that despite their conflicts, her mother never hated her, but loved her deeply, making it impossible for her mother to commit suicide due to hatred towards her. Futaba's shadow successfully reveals that the guilt she's carried, the belief that she caused her mother's death, is a false memory. The idea that her mother hated her was a fabricated narrative manifested from Futaba's insecurities, which stemmed from the false suicide note implanted by the men in suits, seeking to exploit Wakaba's research in cognitive science and prevent her daughter from seeking the truth in the future by traumatizing her psychologically. With this revelation, the full context of Wakaba's death comes to light. She was murdered, and the suicide was staged to conceal the truth. Futaba realizes that her mother's final project attracted the attention of malevolent forces who viewed her groundbreaking work as a threat and opportunity for manipulation. This discovery shatters the foundation of Futaba's self-blame, replacing it with justified anger towards those truly responsible. Futaba's persona, Necronomicon, reflects her journey towards self-discovery and understanding. Traditionally, the Necronomicon, a mythical book of forbidden knowledge, carries a reputation as a source of danger and corruption. Yet here, Necronomicon is an intelligent spacecraft representing search for clarity, a means of confronting her past and understanding her trauma. In this context, the book's fearsome reputation is recontextualized, as Futaba's journey redefines the book as a source of wisdom used to assist rather than harm, proving that knowledge and information itself is neutral. It is only dangerous when used to abuse others. Futaba gains the ability to support the Phantom Thieves strategically, scanning the battlefield and providing critical insights. Together, they defeat the Sphinx, which dissolves into a gentle apparition of Wakaba. Futaba expresses her joy in seeing her mother one last time, and they both say that they love each other, a heartfelt reconciliation that provides Futaba with the closure she desperately needed. Futaba Futaba's social link is an integral part of her character development. Through repeated actions with Ren, Futaba develops a system to overcome her psychological challenges, incrementally exposing herself to situations that challenge her agoraphobia, social anxiety, and depression. Whether it's spending 30 minutes alone at a store or approaching and conversing with strangers, this approach, known as exposure therapy, offers a pragmatic solution to overcoming anxiety. Exposure therapy is a psychological treatment that involves gradually and systematically exposing individuals to feared situations or objects, enabling them to confront and reduce their anxiety over time. While shadow work, which addresses the fundamental aspects of one's trauma, is essential, combining it with small, attainable goals each week fosters practical, habitual change in one's life. This strategy, while uncomfortable in the short term, may alleviate mental health conditions and significantly improve one's quality of life. By the end of the narrative, Futaba learns to gradually overcome her anxieties, navigating social interactions, discovering friendship, laughter, and the simple pleasures of everyday life, such as technology and pop culture action figures.
You two won't be officially registered just yet. But for the moment, you'll be welcomed into his household.
But Father,
Enough. I have my hands full with the company. Don't cause any more trouble for me.
Kunakaze Okumura is the wealthy and influential CEO of Okumura Foods, a global food conglomerate that owns popular fast food chains like Big Bang Burger. Once a poverty-stricken boy, too poor to afford the model spaceships he dreamed of, he transformed his father's failing business into a mainstream success. Now, with significant power in the business world, Kunakazu is attempting to transition from a powerful CEO into a politician. Okumura's personality is characterized by his strict, authoritarian demeanor and unwavering dedication to his business empire. His treatment of his family reflects his prioritization of business over personal connection, leaving his daughter Haru feeling used, neglected, and emotionally distant from her father. For instance, Okumura sets up an arranged marriage between Haru and Sugimura, a member of a powerful and influential family, to secure political benefits, as he blurs the lines of consent by coercing his daughter into a relationship, completely ignoring her input. Kunakaze's business practices are equally ruthless. Beyond experimenting with dangerous food additives, which risk mass poisoning the population of Japan, Okumura has also used his connections to order the mental shutdowns of executives from rival companies. This was the same tactic that killed Futaba's mother. Kunakazu's combination of controlling behavior, lofty expectations, political and business ambitions, and flagrant disregard for morality makes him an ideal target for the Phantom Thieves. Despite being the daughter of the CEO of Japan's McDonald's, essentially, Haru Okumura avoids the spotlight, rarely speaking unless spoken to, and prefers to keep to herself. To her classmates, she's the mysterious, soft-spoken girl who seems polite but distant. This aura of mystery is only heightened by the natural divide her wealth and social status create. Beneath this exterior, Haru is a gentle and kind-hearted individual, defined by her compassion and forgiveness.
Now, let's leave it at that. We just need to be mindful about what we're saying, correct?
She finds solace in tending to her plants, often spending hours in the school garden or on the balcony of her home, caring for her flowers and vegetables. Haru's kindness extends to those around her, even those who don't always deserve it. Her people-pleasing tendencies, undoubtedly a learned response to her father's controlling nature, are rooted in a deep-seated desire to avoid conflict and maintain peace. People-pleasing is defined as the tendency to prioritize the needs of others over one's own, and for Haru, this manifests as a forgiving nature that, while humbling and supporting to those with good intentions, leaves her vulnerable to exploitation by more predatory figures in her life.
I'll just be told to beg for his forgiveness, even if it means groveling on the ground.
Ironically, her journey with the Phantom Thieves, the one group that would never exploit her, is about teaching her to forgive less. Through her time with the thieves, she reclaims her autonomy, transforming from a passive bargaining chip in her father's political ambitions into an individual with agency, self-respect, and the strength to confront those who would confront her.
What the? Goddamn cat!
Mona-chan! Damn it.
I am useless.
Morgana is the cat-like companion of the Phantom Thieves, serving as their guide within the metaverse. Despite his invaluable role in strategizing missions and navigating the complex layers of the metaverse, Morgana often feels unappreciated and undervalued by the group. His constant support and expertise are noticed, but never vocalized, leading to feelings of frustration and a sense of purposelessness. Morgana's unappreciated efforts stem from the group's focus on their individual strengths and fight for autonomy. These intimate, messy moments are inherently human, and while Morgana's personality is just as vivid and complex as any of theirs, the physical and contextual distinctions between him and human beings cause him to doubt himself. Suffering from amnesia, he frequently wishes to be human, outright rejecting the idea that he's a cat, even when the evidence is right there in front of him.
I gotta be human. I am the core of the Phantom Thieves, after all.
For Morgana, being just a cat isn't an insult, it's an existential threat. If he's just a cat, then who is he? What purpose does he serve? Ryuji's playful jabs about Morgana's perceived usefulness only fuel this insecurity.
A reality that one's heart shows. Is it like the application of optical illusions in social cognitive psychology?
Ain't she more amazing than you?
We're about the same!
To Sakamoto, it's well-intentioned negging, but they weigh heavily on Morgana, especially as the team continues to add members with skills that overlap with Morgana's. For someone already grappling with self-worth issues, these moments reinforce a fear that he's becoming obsolete. Morgana's response to this tension is rebellion. Frustrated and feeling invisible, he distances himself from the group, choosing to team up with Haru. This partnership isn't random. Haru and Morgana are two sides of the same coin. While Haru pretends to be nice to people to avoid conflict, Morgana tends to avoid people to hide his love for them. Naturally, as the Phantom Thieves split up, the palace proves to be too dangerous for both sides, but even after reuniting, Morgana struggles to let go of his resentment. He threatens to leave the group, feigning disinterest.
It's time for us to go our separate ways.
His actions are a textbook example of avoidant behavior, a coping mechanism where people disengage from distressing thoughts, feelings, or situations to protect themselves. It's easier for Morgana to act like he doesn't care than to admit that he's hurt.
Hey, wait!
It's time. Be honest, Mona-chan.
However, Haru doesn't let him get away with this. Her entire life has been about playing nice to avoid conflict, so she recognizes exactly what Morgana is doing. And for someone like Morgana, who spends a lot of effort fighting to be seen, this is exactly what he needs. Haru directly challenges Morgana, forcing him to confront himself, and when he's backed into a corner, the truth finally comes out. His fear of abandonment, his fear of being useless, his fear of never being enough, and ultimately, his true feelings for the Phantom Thieves as a whole. He loves them, and he wants to stay with them forever.
This is home. It's the only place I belong. Please, I want to stay here forever.
This moment is cathartic for Morgana, but it's transformative for Haru too. Haru has spent her whole life being polite and passive to maintain the illusion of peace, and she finally breaks the cycle. She rejects her father's control, refuses her engagement to Sugimura, and even initially hurts her friend in order to get him to open up and save himself from self-destruction. Haru's journey of assertiveness parallels Morgana's journey of acceptance. They were both running away from their problems, just in different directions. While Haru needed to learn that she is not an object in her father's political aspirations, Morgana needed to learn that it isn't his usefulness that makes him important to the Phantom Thieves. He is intrinsically useful because he is their friend. Okumura's palace is a spaceship, sterile, efficient, and lifeless, a visual representation of Okumura's psyche and worldview. It reflects the hyper-mechanized environment of a dystopian corporate system where efficiency is valued above all else. Inside this world, human beings aren't seen as people, they're literal robots. Employees are units in a system, and their only value comes from their ability to function. If they failed, they aren't supported or rehabilitated. They're discarded. This dehumanization isn't a byproduct of his perfectionism, it's the logical endpoint of his ideology. Okumura genuinely believes that to achieve perfection, humanity must be stripped away. Emotions, flaws, and inefficiencies are all seen as liabilities. But Okumura's pursuit of perfection extends beyond his workers. He also applies it to himself. By becoming a commander of machines, he too becomes a machine. He loses his humanity in the process. Kunakaze Okumura, on the surface, is the archetype of a capitalist extremist, a self-made man obsessed with legacy productivity, and perfection. But beneath his grandeur of the easily hateable CEO is a tragic figure who saved his father's poverty-stricken company with innovation, yet became consumed by feelings of inadequacy and an unshakable fear of being discarded in the process. Okumura's father was described as a great man, but unfortunately not the best businessman. The family business always struggled, leaving Kunakazu to suffer financially for most of his life. As a child, he distinctly remembers a moment that shaped his worldview. The time he couldn't afford a model spaceship, his favorite toy of all time that he desperately wanted. It was then that he learned to associate success with access. He views life as a meritocratic game, one where everyone has the potential to succeed if they just play it correctly. Merit refers to one's skills, abilities, or achievements, the qualities that make someone deserving of success or rewards. Therefore, a meritocracy is a system where people succeed or fail based on their individual merit, with the assumption that everyone is competing on a level playing field. Because Okumura became successful from nothing, he believes everyone is capable of that success too, so long as they work hard enough. This belief isn't just false, it's insidious. It carries the illusion of fairness, and it's easy to feel like the good guy when you believe in it. After all, if everyone has an equal shot at success, then praising hard work feels noble. But the other side of that belief is far less noble. If success is solely the result of merit, then anyone who fails to succeed must be doing so because of their own incompetence. This is the foundation of Okumura's mindset. Those who fail are seen as lazy, inefficient, or defective. To him, they are bots, machines that fail to operate correctly. They aren't people with circumstances, struggles, or unfair disadvantages. They are flawed products. What makes this belief so dangerous is that it's built on Okumura's own lived experience. He came from nothing, he suffered, and he won. To him, this victory validates the system. His personal story becomes a universal rule. If I did it, so can you. And if you can't, you're broken. But what Okumura fails to see is that the system that discarded him as a child wasn't fair to him either. The system didn't reward him for his merit, it rewarded him for his adaptation to its brutal demands. Okumura clings to this mindset because it offers comfort. It allows him to feel like his suffering had meaning, like he earned his wealth. But what's the truth? He earned a company from his father. That is an advantageous position. This is the tragedy of Kunakazu Okumura. The game that he won was never fair to begin with, but instead of rejecting it, he became it. And when you view a world as a system where people are only as valuable as they merit, it's only a matter of time before you stop seeing them as people at all. But because Okumura believes that everyone, no matter what, can achieve his level of success, and crucially, that everyone inherently wants to, in these moments, Okumura isn't just applying his worldview, he is projecting it. Projection is a psychological defense mechanism where a person attributes their own unwanted thoughts, feelings, or traits onto someone else. Instead of recognizing those traits within themselves, they project them onto others. From his treatment of his workers, to the handling of his daughter, to his interactions with the Phantom Thieves, when the thieves target him, he dismisses them as petty children who are merely jealous of his success. He genuinely believes this. In his mind, there is no other possible explanation. But here's the deeper irony. The very qualities Okumura criticizes in others are the ones he fears most in himself. His obsession with control, productivity, and perfection isn't just about maintaining his success. It's about running from his own self-doubt. He's terrified as being seen as inadequate. He fears being seen as one of the failures he despises, and so he projects that fear onto everyone else. The employees he discards, the Phantom Thieves he dismisses, even his daughter Haru, he sees them all through the filter of his own unresolved insecurities. This projection isn't arbitrary, it's rooted in his past. As a child, Okumura knew what it felt like to be powerless, a cog in the wheel of a larger, uncaring system. He knew what it was like to be a replaceable nobody in a world that didn't care about him. It's a story that's as old as the system itself. A child who feels discarded grows up to discard others. All of his actions, his obsession with perfection, his need to win, and his belief in utility as the measure of a person's worth are a reaction against that childhood pain. Okumura's tragic flaw is that he spends his entire life trying to distance himself from the little boy who was too much of a failure to get the toy he wanted. But in that attempt to escape his past, he becomes the furthest thing from an innocent child, an old, bitter, ruthless businessman. The tragedy is that deep down, Okumura cares. He cares for Haru. He may even care for his workers, having once been in their position himself.
When the cafe closed and he saw all the lives grandfather had touched, Father cried. I believe they were tears of love, maybe even joy.
He'll change his heart, and one day become that man again.
Yeah, he will.
Kunakazi's story is a tale of duality. He is both the traumatized child who felt neglected by society and the ruthless CEO who perpetuated that same neglect. His rise from worker to executive is a textbook example of oppressed becoming the oppressor. And here lies the ethical dilemma. At what point do we stop empathizing with someone who was once a victim, but later became a source of systemic harm? It's easy to sympathize with people at the bottom of a system. Their pain is visible, their suffering relatable. But as soon as someone becomes powerful, people feel justified in dehumanizing them. Is this correct? Is it possible to hold both perspectives at once? Society tends to dehumanize powerful figures, especially those like Okumura, whose authority is rooted in exploitative systems like capitalism. But part of that moral and ethical dilemma is the justification for doing so isn't baseless. Okumura and others like him knowingly engaged in corrupt and abusive practices that harmed an entire society. Okumura's story could have ended differently. He could have been a rehabilitated man who used his powers to heal rather than control. He could have been the CEO who saw his workers as people, not assets. His story could have been one of change, a man who acknowledged his flaws and transformed his company from within. And in some ways, Kunakazu's story is a story of change.
Haru, I promise, instead of putting profits over everything, I will prioritize my people, my workers, and the customers this company was supposed to...
But it's change that came too late. It's the story of an innocent boy who, desperate to never feel powerless again, became the very thing he feared. A boy who clawed his way to the top, only to find himself bound by the same chains he once fought to escape. He became an oppressor, terrified of being discarded, and in the end, he was discarded all the same.
Haru, let's go back to the way we were. Us together, and we were laughing.
The order of this country and caused an uprising against its very existence. You'll most likely be given life imprisonment or the death penalty, unless you accept my proposal.
The four remaining palaces are Sainijima, Masayoshi Shido, the Holy Grail, and Maruki. In this final section, we continue to analyze each authority figure's underlying philosophy, their relevance to social systems, and most crucially, how the most morally bankrupt antagonists in Persona 5 reflect aspects of humanity that reside in all of us. In Persona 5, Sainijima is the personification of humanity's relentless drive to succeed. On the surface, she appears to be a strict, Justin-driven prosecutor, but as the story unfolds, her palace reveals the deeper truth. Sai's actions aren't driven by justice, they're driven by victory. Unlike other characters who are corrupted by greed, lust, or pride, Sai is corrupted by something far more subtle: pragmatism. Pragmatism means an approach that assesses the truth of meaning of theories or beliefs in terms of the success of their practical application. She doesn't crave wealth or power for its own sake, she craves tangible results. Her fixation on results is what makes her both exceptional and dangerous. Pragmatism itself is not inherently good or evil, it's a psycho-philosophical tool, but when the tool is wielded without self-reflection, it can lead to a slow erosion of morality. There's a scene where Sai threatens Sojiro into giving her information by leveraging his parental rights, threatening that he'd never see Futaba again.
Would you like to take this to domestic court? Our chances of victory are roughly 99.9% though. With these suspicions of abuse, there's no way you could avoid having your custody revoked.
She knows the legal system is flawed and doesn't care if she's twisting justice, as long as it helps her achieve her goal. Sai isn't purely evil or good, she just values success so highly that her ethics bend in service to that goal. Her palace manifests as a casino, a space where luck masquerades as skill, and where its inhabitants are tricked into perceiving an illusionary reality. Sai is not only aware that the casino is rigged, but more than that, she controls the game, and this is essential to understanding her philosophy of the world. Sai knows how society functions. She doesn't just play to win, she seeks control to ensure that she can never lose. One of the most compelling aspects of Sai's character is how she approaches the system she operates in. It's easy to criticize systems like patriarchy, capitalism, or racial hierarchies. People critique them constantly, and those critiques are often valid, but critiquing a system does not give you power over it.
Moving up in the world is difficult as a woman. Yet you can't do much if you don't have the authority.
People are praised for speaking out against oppression, but are rarely encouraged to master the system itself. Sai does something most people don't. She doesn't critique the system.
I'll use every method necessary to make it happen.
She studies it, learns it, and ultimately masters it. For example, not once does she ever blame men or the patriarchy for her hardships as a woman in a male-dominated field. She simply accepts that that is the reality and acts accordingly. Her method for solving sexist problems is the same as any problem. Regardless of the circumstances or dynamics at play, she simply asks herself one pivotal question: how do I win? Her sister Makoto serves as the perfect counterpoint to this philosophy. Makoto represents the traditional mindset that many of us are taught. If we expose injustice, the system will change. Makoto believes in reform, and while Makoto critiques the system, Sai navigates it. She doesn't just survive in a rigged system, she becomes one of its strongest players.
I've been thinking lately. About those Phantom Thieves, I mean. If Dad were still alive...
Would Dad have been happy with them? I don't care. He died upholding some lofty sense of righteousness, leaving all his responsibilities on us.
All I was trying to say...
Her relationship with Makoto is symbolic of two opposing mindsets. Makoto believes in fighting from the outside, and Sai believes in controlling from within. This contrast is seen when Sai tells Makoto to be more pragmatic and stop relying on idealism. Unfortunately, it's delivered through verbal abuse, but there's some validity to it. Makoto, at this point of the story, is still hoping to fix the world, while Sai understands that the world isn't designed to be fixed, it's designed to be exploited.
We will find evidence on this, no matter what it takes.
I was unable to make any kind of impact with either Suzui-san or Kaneshiro. Turns out there's no use for a rule-abiding honor student when things get rough.
The most effective way to gain power isn't to complain about the rules. It's to learn them so thoroughly that they no longer apply to you.
Justice cannot yield itself to evil. I must win, no matter what it takes.
None of this is justice, it's hypocrisy!
Her character arc is not about avoiding corruption, it's about realizing that she's already the dealer, already controlling the table, already making sure that everyone else plays by her rules. Near the end of the narrative, Sai Nijima begins to help the Phantom Thieves, and people might misconstrue this as a redemption arc. In truth, she never had a change of heart. The Phantom Thieves failed to alter her core beliefs before Joker gets arrested, and Sai's treasure remains untouched. Sai always attempted to work outside of the system for success, so she never really changed her moral framework in joining the Phantom Thieves. Instead, the framework itself was always morally fluid, driven only by what secures her the victory. This flaw is not unique to Sai, it reflects the broader human tendency to conflate winning with worth, where success is pursued for its own sake, regardless of who's harmed along the way. However, unlike other palace rulers in Persona 5, Sai's change is not the result of external interference. Her treasure is never stolen, and her heart is not forcibly changed by the Phantom Thieves. Her evolution occurs naturally and circumstantially.
The reason I joined the Phantom Thieves was to heal your heart, after all.
My own achievements were all that mattered to me. I was desperate.
The pivotal moment comes when she chooses to protect Joker, not because it's the winning move, but because it's the morally correct move. Her growth is not a rejection of her pragmatism. Sai does not discard her logical, result-oriented nature. She still values success, but now she also values protection. This final stage of Sai's character arc is essential for understanding her role in Persona 5's larger philosophical framework. It is not enough to master the system for one's own benefit. True mastery lies in being able to navigate the system while protecting those within it. Sai shows us that victory without purpose is hollow. True power is not found in the ability to control people, but in the ability to save them. Her shift is not from pragmatism to morality, but from pragmatism to stewardship. It's this subtle but profound difference that represents one of the most nuanced forms of growth in Persona 5's story.
I'll end it. I swear I'll take them down and damn the cost.
Glad I was able to save you in court. I've never felt so happy in my entire life. I'm not quite sure how to put it, but saving your future meant more to me than my own career. I feel like you even taught me how to live.
I humbly ask that you cast your vote for me, Masayoshi Shido. Let us all set sail toward a happy future, together.
Shido's public image is that of a savior politician, a man of reform, integrity, and resolve. He speaks with confidence, his voice unshaken by doubt. His calls for justice and reform play directly into the public sphere of uncertainty. People don't follow Shido because they agree with his policies entirely. They follow him because he makes them feel safe. But behind closed doors, Shido is nothing like his public image. His tone becomes cold, his kindness turns into condensation, and the people who work with him are seen as pawns, not people. This duality is most evident in his relationship with Goro Akechi. It's revealed that the famous prince detective is actually the man responsible for carrying out Shido's mental shutdown assassinations. Akechi is also Shido's illegitimate son, but Shido refuses to acknowledge him as family. He calls him a pawn and a brat, reducing him to a disposable asset rather than a human being. Shido's reasoning for this is simple. To recognize Akechi as his son would make him vulnerable. A son can defy you, but a pawn has no power. This is the heart of Shido's flaws. He doesn't want people around him, he wants objects.
Find a way to stop a change of heart! Don't we have Wakaba Ishiki's research materials? And what about Akechi? Where did that useless brat go?
This is where the tragedy of Shido and Akechi comes full circle. They are mirrors of each other. Just as Shido pursues power to avoid vulnerability, Akechi pursues perfection for the same reason. He believes that if he can rise high enough, become the perfect detective, and serve the perfect revenge on the father who abandoned him, that he will finally be accepted. But it's the same flawed logic as Shido. Chasing invulnerability doesn't make you safe, it makes you fragile. The higher you rise, the more terrified you become of failing. Akechi learns this lesson too late. In his attempt to kill the Phantom Thieves, he realizes during their final confrontation that they already valued him. They saw him as someone to be acknowledged, even admired. Joker in particular saw him as a rival and in some ways a friend.
I couldn't be special. Dude, you're more than special.
It pains me to admit, but your wit and strength far exceeds ours. We only defeated you by teaming up. I was honestly envious of your natural ability.
The tragedy is that Akechi was already valuable, but by telling himself a narrative of perfectionism and revenge, he convinced himself that he had to become something to be worthy. This self-imposed pressure drove him to extremes, and his commitment to that story justified murder. But the more he chased perfect control, the more isolated he became. The more he saw himself as different, the more he distanced himself from the people who would have loved and accepted him as he was. This is why his story is so painful. He already had what he was looking for, but because he couldn't see it, he lost it. He alienated himself from the very people who were willing to see him as more than just a pawn. This is the ultimate irony of Akechi and Shido's arc. These lessons apply even to those at the very top. When you live in a system that treats people as pawns, losing doesn't just mean failure, it's a death sentence. Akechi tried to master that system. He believed he could play it perfectly, but no one is perfect forever, and in a world where people are treated as disposable, losing means you become disposable too. This is the trap of power. People believe that they can rise above their problems, they'll be safe, but power never makes you independent, it just raises the stakes of your demise. After his defeat, Shido is forced to confront something he spent his entire life avoiding. He is no different from anyone else. Shido has spent his entire life believing he was above others. He believed he could rise high enough to escape vulnerability, but now, for the first time, he's realizing that was a lie. He was never untouchable. He was just another man clinging to power like everyone else. This moment is uncomfortable because it forces the audience to confront their own lives. How many people climb the ladder because they believe it makes them better than others? How many people pursue success not for joy, but to escape being ordinary? Shido's realization is meant to make us reflect on this truth. The pursuit of control, status, and perfection isn't about strength, it's about fear. The tragedy is that Shido could have accepted this truth at any point. He could have admitted that he was human, vulnerable, imperfect, but instead he spent his entire life running from that truth and oppressing others. Shido teaches us one of the most uncomfortable lessons in Persona 5. As a human being, you are intrinsically valuable, but you are not special. This statement sounds polarizing, but it shouldn't be. It should feel liberating. Shido believed all his life that he had to be above others. He believed he had to be stronger, smarter, smarter, more powerful. He believed that happiness lies in the extraordinary. But Shido shows us the truth. Control is a lie. People who spend their lives trying to rise above others only succeed in isolating themselves. Shido's palace manifests as a ship floating above a sunken Japan filled with sycophants and enablers. His palace is a reflection of the reality he believes will lead to happiness. And this depiction is true, but not for the reasons he believes. The sea in this case doesn't represent happiness, it represents humanity. It's always there, you can't escape it, and no person can rise so high that they're untouchable. No matter how Shido builds his society, he's still touching the water. He's still touching humanity. And here's the part that's hardest to hear. You don't need to be untouchable. People chase power to avoid being vulnerable, but vulnerability isn't something to escape, it's something to accept. Shido didn't understand that until it was too late, but you still have time. His ship floated above the sea, but it never escaped it. Shido could never escape humanity, and neither will we. However, there is a distinct difference between acceptance and submission.
I don't want any more trouble. I finally get to live without having to think for myself now.
Submission happens in individuals, but also happens on a global scale as well. Submission, in a societal sense, is a nuanced problem that provides everyone stability, but it also stunts our growth. Power, fear, and desire for control are easy to identify, but this submission isn't something that's forced on us by external oppressors. In fact, even the so-called oppressors like Shido and Kamashido, they aren't exempt from it. They too are victims to submission. In this context, submission is an insidious issue. It's the internal human impulse to seek comfort at the cost of freedom, and we all suffer from it.
I'm done acting like a big shot. Who cares if I'm stupid?
The Holy Grail is the physical representation of this force in Persona 5, but in real life, it doesn't look like a giant golden chalice. It looks like the oppressive systems we create, sustain, and justify for the sake of peace. Like most systems, the Holy Grail is a manifestation of everyone's will, but in this case, everyone's will to submit. Every prior palace ruler was driven by personal flaws, but the Holy Grail is not a person. It has no ego, no ambition, and no need for power. Instead, it thrives on the collective will to submit. The Grail isn't a villain in the traditional sense. It doesn't demand obedience. It doesn't force people to submit through fear or violence. People offer themselves to it willingly. If you've ever seen someone stay in a toxic job that they could leave because it's stable, you've seen the Grail. If you've ever seen someone stay in a relationship that makes them miserable to avoid loneliness, you've seen the Grail. If you've ever seen people continue to follow corrupt leaders because at least they keep things safe and predictable, you've seen the Grail. The Grail is a passive force manifested by people's exhaustion and fear. People would rather endure familiar suffering than face the unknown. People submit not because they want to, but because freedom comes with risk. Freedom comes with chaos, and choices can lead to regret. The Holy Grail buys you out of that anxiety, but the price to pay is your autonomy. This is why submission doesn't feel evil, it feels safe. In reality, they're slowly giving up their power. It's death by 1,000 comforts. When people refuse to challenge their own beliefs because it's uncomfortable, those beliefs become the system. The Grail isn't created by one person, it's created by millions of micro decisions. And over time, those millions of submissions forms a system of submission. No one has to enforce it, it self-replicates. Everyone becomes an enforcer. Schools enforce conformity by shaming children who don't fit in. Workplaces enforce submission through unpaid overtime and passive punishment for dissent. Politicians enforce submission through fear campaigns that tell people, if you don't vote for us, chaos will reign. But these aren't villains doing this. It's not that comically evil. It's everyone who maintains a system because they're afraid of uncertainty. The Holy Grail isn't beaten in the traditional sense. It's not a boss fight you can win on your own. Joker and the Phantom Thieves can't beat it alone because they aren't the ones who power it. The people are. This is why the Phantom Thieves have to inspire the masses. It's the people collectively who have to reject the Grail. This is what separates it from other palace rulers. Kamoshida could be overthrown, Shido could be exposed, but the Grail can only be rejected. This is the core of Persona 5's message. Autonomy is not given, it's claimed. When the Phantom Thieves confront the Grail, they aren't just fighting a bad guy, they're confronting the system of human apathy. The Grail is every bad job, every abusive system, every quiet act of surrender that people engage in to keep the peace. The fight isn't just against the Grail, it's against a part of ourselves that want to submit. Recognize the Grail in your life. Ask yourself, where am I letting comfort control me? Challenge false stability. Ask yourself, what am I afraid of losing if I walk away from this? Speak up once, walk away once, reclaim small acts of autonomy. Each act weakens the Grail. Ultimately, however, the Grail's power is never fully destroyed. This part is fundamental to us. It's never going to go away. The system will always try to reform itself. Comfort will always be tempting, and submission will always seem like the smart choice, but autonomy is always the answer.
When you work as a counselor, you always think, I have to help this person so their heart doesn't break. But that's easier said than done. This world really is a callous one. No matter how much positivity or dedication a person has, just a bit of influence from their peers can easily mess with their heads. Every time I'm confronted with such a situation, I can't help but grasp the limitations of therapy as a profession.
Dr. Maruki is not like the other antagonists of Persona 5. He does not dominate through force, coercion, or public spectacle. His methods are quiet, kind, and disarmingly gentle.
Grown to be very strong, Yoshizawa-san.
But beneath that kindness lies an equally suffocating form of control, one rooted in benevolence. While the more oppressive figures thrive on suffering, Maruki seeks to eliminate it.
Once her inner turmoil begins to settle, I'll have her remember her life as she wishes to live it.
And he frames his offer with a deceptively simple question. What would make you happy? On the surface, this question appears compassionate, even therapeutic. It opens the door for people to confront their pain, to think deeply about what they need to heal. In practice, however, this question reveals Maruki's deeper flaw. He isn't asking because he wants to help these people grow. He's asking because he plans to give them exactly what they ask for. Maruki offers his victims an escape. His compassion turns from empathy to control. And eventually, he seeks to do this on a global scale. This is where his role shifts from therapist to a benevolent dictator. One of Maruki's first victims is Sumire Yoshizawa, but to understand her role in all of this, we must first understand her pain. Sumire Yoshizawa's story is one of tragic loss, a tale of two athletic, competitive twin sisters where one outshines the other. Except Yoshizawa is not presented to the audience as Sumire when we first meet her. She is presented as her older sister, Kasumi Yoshizawa. But Kasumi is dead. This is not a metaphor. Kasumi died in an accident, a tragic event that left Sumire consumed by grief, suffering from survivor's guilt, and amplified the crushing pressure to live up to her sister's legacy. Sumire blames herself for the accident, believing that her inferiority and failure to measure up caused her sister's death.
Dr. Maruki, I want to become Kasumi.
I know. And I'm sure you can too. Just believe in yourself. How about it? Are you feeling any better now?
Yes.
In that moment of vulnerability, Maruki helps her, but his help isn't therapy, it's not growth. It's stagnation built on a lie. Maruki rewrites Sumire's identity. He doesn't console her, he doesn't guide her through her grief, he completely erases it. In his reimagined world, she is no longer Sumire. She literally becomes Kasumi. Her memories, her sense of self, her identity are all rewritten. Gone is the guilt, the pain, and the loss, as well as her autonomy. This is what makes Maruki's philosophy so deeply unsettling. He doesn't inflict pain, he removes it. But removing pain offers so many implications that people fail to realize. Grief, as painful as it is, has a purpose. It forces us to confront loss, to feel the weight of change, and to grow and understand ourselves and the world. By erasing Sumire's grief, Maruki doesn't only halt, he perverts that process. happiness. He offers Sumeria a world where she can be her sister, where she can live up to the perfection she once idolized, but in doing so, he strips her of everything that made her unique, and in an attempt to save one's sister, Maruki effectively kills both. If the Holy Grail represents submission to comfort, then Maruki represents something far more subtle, oppressive benevolence. Consider this. What if someone took away all your pain? What if they could erase your regrets, rewrite your mistakes, undo your loss? It sounds like salvation, but look closer. Freedom from suffering is not the same as freedom itself. This is where Maruki's logic unravels. He believes that by controlling suffering, by changing it fundamentally, he can create peace. But peace built on control is inherently oppressive. His ideology is altruistic on paper, but authoritarian in practice. He offers people an escape, but this escape has a cost. I'll take away your pain, but I'll also take away your right to face it. While Shido fails to achieve absolute power because he is still human, Maruki transcends humanity. Through cognitive science, he bends reality itself. And in doing so, he strips something away far more important than your autonomy. He strips away your entire humanity. Here lies the heart of Maruki's mistake. Happiness is fleeting by design. It isn't something permanent. Happiness, like all emotions, exists in contrast to pain. You cannot know joy without discomfort. You cannot know satisfaction without struggle. Maruki, despite being a well-educated psychologist, fundamentally rejects this truth. He treats happiness like a permanent state. His vision for the world isn't just unrealistic, it's hollow. In his world, people smile, but their smiles mean nothing. By locking people into a constant state of happiness, his utopia becomes a vapid, superficial, and stagnant dream, where no one grows, changes, or suffers. But his flaw extends beyond philosophy. It's logistical. If Maruki succeeds in creating a world where everyone's desires are fulfilled, what happens when those desires conflict? If two people wish to become the world's greatest chef, who wins? The answer is simple. He rewrites their desires. When conflicting dreams arise, he doesn't grant them, he edits them. He convinces you that what you really want is something smaller, something achievable, something different. But at this point, his utopia isn't a utopia anymore. It's a world of compromises and controlled illusions. People believe they're getting what they want, but in truth, they're getting what Maruki believes they should want.
Will carve my own path for myself. I refuse to accept a reality concocted by someone else, stuck under their control for the rest of my days.
Maruki represents the pursuit of blissful ignorance, escaping from one's problems. His world is a reality where no one suffers, no one grows, and no one lives fully. If the Phantom Thieves believe in reclaiming autonomy, Maruki represents its opposite. While the Phantom Thieves force criminals to confront their distortions, Maruki, in an attempt to fix their flaws, erases what made them human in the first place. What makes Maruki the most terrifying antagonist of Persona 5 is he doesn't feel like he's an enemy. He feels like a friend. A kind, well-meaning friend who wants nothing but the best for you. But this is the flaw of oppressive benevolence. Kindness does not excuse control. Love does not justify dominance. Maruki doesn't force you into submission, he convinces you to submit. He makes you believe you're free while quietly guiding every step you take. His reign is not forged through violence, but through surrender. Maruki's philosophy is haunting because it reflects our own world. It mirrors the dangers of comfort at all costs thinking. It's a reminder that true happiness cannot be fabricated. It must be earned. And in the end, that's what makes him so dangerous. Persona 5 Royal is a game about reclaiming identity, autonomy, and meaning. Its story is fiction, and any resemblance to people living or dead are claimed to be entirely coincidental. But its conflicts are real. The systems it critiques exist and continue to dominate our lives every single day. So while the narrative ends with a group of outlaws saying their goodbyes to each other after saving the world, the true story begins in how you respond. Will you remain complacent in the face of others' abuse, or will you take actions to save them? Will you continue to underestimate your own potential, or will you finally stand up for what you've always known to be true? Will you keep monitoring and challenging your own beliefs, or will you succumb to the inevitable moral and ethical blind spots that sustain oppressive systems? Will you see yourself reflected in both the world's most virtuous characters and its most notorious villains, and understand that we are all fundamentally the same, with conflicts arising only from differing perceptions? Will you confront the reality that pain is an inherent part of being human, and that love and happiness only exist in contrast with that truth. Will you complete this video and the game having learned something meaningful, or will you only pretend to grow and forget its lessons as soon as it's over?